Hi guys. Stage feels a little ridiculous given the size of the audience, but thank you all for coming. It's good to see you. Some of you I know very well and some of you I don't know quite as well, but I look forward to getting to know you better this semester. So Maria Howard, I'm assistant professor of philosophy at Gonzaga. I've done most of my research in assisted suicide in bioethics. So the idea or the topic of philosophy and suicide is really close to my heart in a lot of ways. I think it's one of those things that ultimately if you do philosophy, you're going to come up against the question of value, right? What matters? What should matter? Do things matter, right? And if your answer to that is ultimately no, there's a concrete action you can take, right? There's something that you can do in order to sort of mitigate the fact that things don't matter. And I think ultimately, hi guys, good, how about you? Ultimately, this is a question of deep importance to anybody who's going to claim to do philosophy. So standard disclaimer, I give this every time I talk. The stuff that we'll talk about in here, I don't think it probably won't be but so personal to most people, but if it is, there's help out there for you, and there's plenty of it, right? If you're a Gonzaga student, obviously Cura Personalis, or Gonzaga staff, I'm sure Cura Personalis would come and talk to you. But there's, if anything comes up out of this, it's really important that you reach out, right? I give the standard disclaimer because I think it's a very real thing, people dealing with sort of suicidal thoughts and suicidal feelings. And, it's kind of amazing when you do this work and when you go present on this work, how many people will come up to you afterwards and tell you either of their own suicidality or their loved one's suicidality. So I never want to start a presentation just assuming that everybody's here out of academic interest. So I'd kind of like to run this as a conversation, which is weird with the microphone, but they're telling me that my voice is being piped into rooms, which feels strange. Why'd you get out of bed this morning? And I mean, this is like a very real question.
To get breakfast for my daughter.
Yeah, get breakfast for your daughter. She was probably up and saying, Mommy, I'm hungry. Why else did you get out of bed this morning? Yeah, you had to be at work. Good. Why else? Class, right? How many of you got out of bed because you needed to pee? Or you were hungry, or you felt like you needed coffee or a cigarette or whatever you do with your morning, right? I think this is a really real question. The idea of like why you get out of bed, the reasons for getting out of bed, the things that get you up and the things that you think about first thing in the morning say a lot about how you orient your life, right? So when I got out of bed this morning, I not only needed to pee, but I also got up and I was like, okay, it's time to write. This is when I do my writing. I'm going to go to the coffee shop. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to write for the next couple of hours. On the flip side, why'd my cats get out of bed? Well, they weren't in bed, but they sleep 16 hours a day. Why do they get up? Yeah, go to the bathroom, get some food, because there's a noise that distracts them. They get up totally out of impulse, right? There's likely, and depends on who you talk to, but likely no rational thought there, no sort of thinking about the projects they have in store for them. All they do is they just start running, So I think the question of why we get out of bed this morning is important for orienting this particular discussion, in part because of the text I'm going to talk about in just a little bit, but also because I think it gives us this idea, or this recognition that there are two sorts of reasons we can say here for doing this, right? Two categories of reasons. One is sort of that which orients sort of meaning, or that which gives us meaning. So I get out of bed because I'm going to work. I get out of bed because I'm going to class. I get out of bed because my religion tells me that work is important and I need to be productive and an industrious member of society. But there are other reasons too, because I'm hungry, because I need to go to the bathroom, because my body just wakes me up, right? I set the alarm every day at 6 and I get up every day at 6. But there's a claim I want to make here. I think that a lot of times we discount the fact that For many of us, getting out of bed is just what we do. We don't think about it. But it's also a really brave choice. There's a lot that can happen to us after we get out of bed. There's a lot that can happen to us when we leave the comfortable confines of our pajamas and our comforters. And this is big and little stuff. I think of Anne Lamott here when she writes in her book, Help, Thanks, Wow, of the little indignities that sort of constantly assault us, right? Even on the best of our days, we might have a cold, or we might stub our toe, or we might recognize that aging is a thing that happens when you turn 30 or 40 or whatever. There's a way in which life can be really hard in these tiny little ways, these tiny indignities that mount up. But there are ways in which life can be so much harder than that, right? We have a friend or a family member or a loved one die, a pet die, we lose our job, we fail a class, we find out med school isn't an option, we find out any number of things that sort of shake us to our very core because of the place that these ways in which we answered meaning, the people that we love, that we cared for, may change or go away. So I think what philosophy does, in a general sense, is it looks at what human beings value, right? Or at least my favorite part of philosophy, looks at what human beings value. And it attempts to sort of explain the bigger answers we give to the question of why we get out of bed. But it also, I think, has to look at why we might not, right? Why we might choose to not continue our projects. And, you know, this is, I think, what leads some to claim, notably Camus, that the only serious or the really serious question in philosophy is that of suicide, right? Why do we continue living? So just a couple of things we're going to do. The first thing I want to do is sort of talk about what suicide is. And I think my favorite way to do that is to look at examples and decide what we think counts. So I've printed out copies of this because I think it's easier to read. And all I want you to do is take a look at the list and tell me, or figure out what you think counts as suicide and what you think does not. Yeah, I printed plenty.